Welcome to A Certain Sound, Genesis chapter 12. We're going to be looking at verse 10. In verse 10, we see Abraham going down to Egypt. He shouldn't have done it. He made a mistake. Great men of God. Abraham, a father of the faith. Great men of God make blunders. Sure, God still loves them. God still works on their behalf. And you're going to see that in this particular chapter, chapter 12 of Genesis. In verse 10 it says, "And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land." What land? The land that God had told him to go to. Are you experiencing a trial, a famine, a spiritual drought? I want to encourage you. Don't go down to Egypt when that happens. See, some people think because they're experiencing a famine or a trial that God must not be with them. Well, let me just share with you. When did Abraham go down to Egypt? You say, when there was a famine in the land. Okay. But what else? Do you have your Bible open? Look at Genesis chapter 12. Now hang in there, all right? Genesis 12, look at verse 1. Now the Lord had said. You see the word had said. He didn't go down to Egypt until after the Lord had said. Can you imagine going down to Egypt, going back to the world for help after the Lord had already spoken to you to get up out of your country and go? It's amazing that what Christians will do even after having heard the Lord speak to them. You know, the Lord wants to speak to you, and the Lord has spoken to you. Can you imagine now going to Egypt after the Lord had spoken to you? But not only that, go to verse 4. "So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him." Not only did the Lord speak to him, but number two, the man, Abraham, had been obedient to the Lord. Can you imagine after having heard the Lord speak, then you're obedient to him? You've obeyed the voice of the Lord. And later on, when there's a famine, you're going down to the world for help? Are you kidding me? Look at verse 6. "And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sychem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land." Not only was he obedient, but he had actually arrived at the place where God had for him. You are at the place that God has for you. It's amazing what people will do after having heard the Lord, obeyed the Lord, and actually arrived at the location they're supposed to be, and still he goes to Egypt after he experiences a bad time. After a famine takes place, he goes to Egypt. This is a lesson for you and me. Can you imagine Christians today hearing the voice of the Lord, being obedient, arriving at the place that God has for them? And look at verse 7. "And the Lord appeared unto Abram." Can you imagine this? I'd say it's getting better. What an encounter with God. After an encounter with the Lord? Listen to this. "And the Lord had spoken to him," verse 1. Abraham departed, he obeyed. He arrived where God wanted him to be. And now the Lord appears to him. And guess what? He still goes to Egypt after all of that. Friend, after all of that, he still makes a mistake and goes to Egypt after the Lord had done wonderful things for him. You know, David had received the kingdom. He was resting in victory after a great victory, a great encounter. Then he messes around with Bathsheba and the thing gets messed up. You know, sometimes after a great victory, a great encounter, the Lord appears, you've been obedient. That's when the enemy will come in and try to tempt you to go back to the world when things don't look so good. I want to encourage you today. You have heard the voice of God. You've been obedient. You've been and gone to the place he wanted you to go, and the Lord has appeared to you, so to speak. You've had an encounter with him. And now what? Stay true to that. And if there's a famine in the land, don't you let that famine take you out of the will of God. That famine in the land, he was still in the place God wanted him to. God can make a way in the desert. Even though you're in the famine, God can bring waters in that desert if you'll just stay put where he puts you. Stay in his will. Don't you leave his will, and don't go down to Egypt. In other words, don't push the panic button and go to the world. Stay in the land where God called you. Stay in the place God put you. And if there's a famine, he will bring waters in the desert, and you will emerge with a greater God than you had at the first.
Thank you for watching A Certain Sound Daily Video Devotional. Be sure to sign up for the iTunes podcast or daily email of A Certain Sound when you visit us online at www.acertainsound.com. A Certain Sound is a ministry of Word of Truth Christian Center in Bowling Green, Ohio. On behalf of Word of Truth Christian Center, I'm Sonetta. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow.